Welcome to Vitality Radio, the podcast where we help you master natural supplements, enhance emotional vitality, and thrive without the use of pharma drugs. My name is Jared St. Clair. I'm here with you twice a week, every week, and I am pretty pumped about today's show. I met this gentleman in Texas about 4 months ago, I think, something like that. At the ECO conference that you've heard me talk a little bit about here on the show, if you're a regular listener. And my wife and I were down there, and this gentleman was up at the microphone, and they had him not only speak but also teach breath work at the beginning of each session to get us all in a good state of mind, to ease away some of the stress of all of the learning that was going on, and get our brains open to the best. In the best state that we could to learn the information that was being presented. And we were both just really blown away by his technique, by his wisdom, and really by his sincerity. He just really struck us as the kind of person that we wanted to get to know better. And immediately I turned to my wife, and she to me, and said, we should see if he'll do the podcast. So without much further ado, I'll introduce this gentleman. And actually, I should have asked before we started here, pronounce your first name for me. I want to make sure I get it right.
Sure, Jared. Thank you. It's Sachin.
It is Sachin. Okay. Sachin Patel. So let me tell you a little bit about him, and then we're going to welcome him in. Sachin Patel is a father, husband, philanthropist, functional medicine practice success coach, if I can speak, speaker, author, breathwork facilitator, as I mentioned, and plant medicine advocate, of course, as am I. Sachin is convinced that the doctor of the future is the patient, and he has committed himself to helping others raise their consciousness, activate their inner doctor, and initiate their deepest healing through the use of lifestyle and breath work. I'm not going to go too much further. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Sachin, because we don't have a lot of time and there's a lot of wisdom here to share. Sachin, welcome to Vitality Radio.
Jared, thank you. It's my absolute honor and pleasure, and I'm very humbled by you and your wife. I always try to put my best foot forward, and I'm glad this opened up some new avenues and opportunities for people to explore their health in a different way.
Well, my wife and I are both big advocates of breath work, and she's actually done a fair amount of training in breath work and uses it a lot herself, more than I do. I don't make as much time for it as I could and probably ought to. But we've both seen a lot of teaching in that area, and we both just really, really love the approach that you took. It felt like I feel it should feel when you're learning breath work, and felt like it really did get us into a proper state of mind for the learning that was there. So we loved what you were doing there, but then we learned later, as we talked to you at the show, and then also you and I speaking right before we recorded today, that breathwork is just a piece of what you do. You've got a lot of stuff going on. So if you don't mind, just introduce to my listeners a little bit more about what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So our focus actually for the last 5 years has been metabolic health, because at the core of every disease and condition is metabolic dysfunction. And a lot of times metabolic dysfunction gets thrown in with diabetes and Alzheimer's and issues of that nature, like metabolic syndrome. But I'm referring right down to the function of the mitochondria. And at ECO and in many other conferences, we've all learned how important the mitochondria is, because it's a powerhouse of all of the cells in our body. So I focus on how to improve mitochondrial function at a granular level and at a global level. And what we've discovered over the years is that being healthy is actually embarrassingly simple. You just have to know exactly what the inputs are, right? Something is hard until you know what to do. And when we started, our practice, our functional medicine practice, we used to do a lot of testing, and, we still run labs and things like that on individuals that need it. But we would have people come in, spend hundreds, sometimes even thousands of dollars on lab testing, and they would want more, right? They were just like, can you do this test? Can you do this test? Can you do this test? And we'd have to talk them off the edge. And eventually we realized, what if one day we woke up and the government said, you can't do any lab testing and you can't give people any more supplements? What would we do in a situation like that? Because if the government could have their way and snap their fingers like Thanos, that's what they would do. They'd get rid of all of us natural healthcare practitioners, right? And kind
Indeed.
of leave all the shills in place.
Yeah.
So we said we have to actually crack that code. Like we have to, just in case that ever happens, we have to at least ask that question. Can we get better, faster, more affordable results if we don't do any lab testing and we don't give people supplements? And so it's just everything starts with a question, right? And then the courage to answer that question. So what we
Hmm.
discovered is we took a group of our clients through our traditional functional medicine programs, and we took a group of our clients through a lifestyle driven program that which we now call Living Light. And the people who went through the lifestyle program actually got better and faster results. And the people that ordered the lab testing, some of them still had their poop kit sitting in their bathroom. They hadn't even done the test kit,
Sure.
right? So a month later, the delta between one group and the other was so different. And so we realized that we have to really, it's our responsibility to crack this code. And therefore, if we can crack this code, we can actually create a program that can scale across different countries, right, different planets when we get to Mars, and something that is easy for other people to implement, because functional medicine can get complicated very quickly,
Yeah.
and it's difficult to replace someone like myself or even yourself who has this encyclopedia, many volumes of encyclopedia worth of knowledge. To replace us is an astronomically difficult task. So if we start thinking about legacy, we have to kind of leave a legacy of simplicity, because simplicity scales. And to really understand the magnitude of the problem uh, is where we start to actually solve it. And what I realized is that I'll never fix this problem working with people one on one. I have to figure out how to fix people en masse. And then I have to figure out how to teach what I do to other practitioners so that they can do the same, because that's the only solution. The solution, unfortunately, is not myself, yourself, other practitioners working with people one on one. There just isn't enough of us to solve this problem. So we just kind of approached it from a different vantage point, and we've been doing kind of strategic fat loss for a long time, long before Ozempic was a thing. We get better, faster, more affordable results. And we don't just help increase the levels of one peptide in your body, we help increase the levels of all the peptides in your body, because we create a global health outcome in your body. And we teach you a set of skills that you will never learn, no matter how many doctors and specialists and hospitals and research centers and facilities you go to. And we teach you a set of skills to allow you that are so simple that you can transfer to the next generation, and really shift and create a whole new legacy for your family. So that's kind of our focus, and what excites me. I hope you can hope that comes through in my voice.
Indeed. And the thing that's interesting, I had you said a couple of things that really resonated with me there. I had an avid listener of my show. He's probably listening right now. Ask me face to face at Vitality Nutrition. He said, Jared, what's going to happen to your show when you're dead? And I said, well, do you know something I don't know coming up here? And he said, but really, are you teaching somebody to be able to do all this stuff? And it was an interesting question. It certainly caught me off guard. I've only been doing the show
Mm-hmm.
for 17 years, but you're right. We do need a way for people to really grab a hold of this information and utilize it without necessarily having to feel like they need to be coached or guided for the rest of their lives. And the one-on-one thing doesn't work. It works on a very, very, very small level, but getting it out there in groups certainly is what makes the most sense. And so I love what you're saying with that, for sure. And we're discussing potentially working with you here at Vitality to uh, push this information out there. Before we started this conversation too, I mentioned our emotional vitality series that we have on Vitality Radio, where all we do is teach skills that we can't sell it. It's not a consumable, but it's a life skill that you can learn that can bring you to a place that you otherwise may not be able to get to. Certainly, a supplement can't do it. A diet shift, can't do some of these things. And as we've talked through, for people that are familiar with this emotional vitality series, there's all kinds of different tools that we like to share. And I know that's, something similar to what you're talking about. And it'll be interesting to see, because I'm just learning about yours, how well these marry together, because I'm sure there's some gaps that your program can probably fill for us. But as you go down the path, it's easy to get people oftentimes to take a supplement. And that's certainly been the thing that I've done for my career, is help people with supplementation. By and large, it's more difficult to get people to make a diet change. It's more difficult to get people to make, another type of lifestyle change. Perhaps it's breath work, or it's exercise, or it's time in nature. We're doing this big outdoor challenge right now just to try and get people to move outside and get the
Hmm.
power of nature. So what you're saying, I think, makes incredible sense. So, in terms of what types of things you're coaching people on, breath work obviously is one of these things. What other types of skills are you teaching?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most important aspects of our health is lighting. And this is something that for many years, we've been talking about it for a long time, but I've really gone even deeper down the rabbit hole in the last few months. And it's something that is absolutely crucial. So, the way we can communicate like this through each other is because of light,
Hmm.
right? So there's fiber optic cables that are connecting us to each other, and there's light impulses that are being sent. And so the same thing is happening every single day when we are exposed to our light environment. So we as human beings are conditioned to be nurtured and informed through sunlight. Sunlight
Hmm.
actually carries wavelengths of visible light and invisible light, ultraviolet and also infrared light, which are actually key uh, pieces of data and information to our brain. So there's actually receptors on our skin, receptors in our retina, and that are responsive to the frequencies of light and the wavelengths of light that are coming into our body or our bodies being exposed to. Unfortunately, nowadays we don't get as much red and infrared light as we used to because our indoor lighting is LED, which has no infrared light on it and barely has any red light in it.
Hmm.
And we get overexposed to blue light. So a lot of people are trying to avoid blue light, smartly so, right? Blue light in the evening raises cortisol, decreases melatonin production,
Right.
and so it disrupts our sleep. But it also disrupts our immune system because when our cortisol is elevated, our our immune system is downregulated, and when we don't, and melatonin and cortisol are antagonists to each other, which means that when cortisol is high, melatonin is low. And melatonin isn't just for sleep. We do release melatonin in our pineal gland to help us fall, not to fall asleep, but it is released by our pineal gland in the presence of darkness while we sleep. But we're releasing and producing melatonin in our mitochondria all day, every day. So we have to make sure that we're understanding the relationship between light and how it affects our hormones. And so a lot of people are avoiding blue light, again, smartly so, but many people are not getting more red and infrared light into their light diet, so to speak.
Right.
And so where people get stuck when it comes to things like weight loss and even health, they get stuck at diet and nutrition. And that's really, it's on the pyramid, but and it's probably the part of the foundation of the pyramid. But if we want to get to the pinnacles of health, we have to climb all the way to the top of the pyramid. And at the top of the pyramid is circadian rhythm. So circadian biology, which is regulated by our exposure to sunlight, is absolutely crucial to the signaling of all of our hormones in our body. It's crucial to the signaling of our organ systems in our body as well. If you look at Chinese organ clock, you'll see that every
Yeah.
organ has a different time of day where it's most active. The way our body tells what time of day it is based on where the sun is in the sky. But if our sun is the overhead lighting that we're exposed to in our office all day, it just thinks it's noon all day. And so some of our organs, get more love than others because that signaling is not taking place. So, before we started this call, I was outside on my front yard. And so I literally spend about 6 hours outdoors each day. I just set myself up. So I have a desk outside and I am either in the sun or in the shade for pretty much my entire workday when the weather permits. So it's a big part of what I do. And I can tell you that it's probably made one of the biggest differences for me. So that's just one example, right? Circadian rhythm and helping people understand how specific times of exposure to specific wavelengths of light, which are absolutely free, you just have to literally go outside, activate healing mechanisms in the body that are quite profound, actually.
Yeah, the healing power of nature is incredibly profound, and light is a big piece of that. In fact, I'm actually prepping a show right now. We haven't recorded it yet, with a coworker of mine who has found the healing power of light to be completely game changing for her. She's
Hmm.
been diving deep into this topic for the last probably year and a half, and has been teaching classes on it. She's going to do a show with me all about that. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because there's so much power in that. What would you say, because we are a bit limited on time, what would you say are a couple of things? Because I find, and I'll be curious, but I think I know the answer in terms of what your experience has been too. There are so many people that are really actively trying to understand how to be well, right? They're listening to people like yourself. They're listening to shows like Vitality Radio. They're over listening to guys like, Andrew Huberman or Joe Rogan, or who knows, any number of other people that are out there talking about, cold plunges and red light and blue light and sunshine and grounding and a million other things. And unfortunately, there's a lot of overwhelm that can come with that. That's maybe
Hmm.
been the biggest thing that I hear from my clients, is they don't know where to start. They feel like they can't do it all. They can't afford it all. They can't learn it all. And so then that creates more cortisol, more stress, and actually less wellness in that state of overwhelm. So I like to do as much as I can with this show to simplify things to the point where hopefully people can not feel the overwhelm and can apply, kind of one thing at a time in their health journey to get to a better place. What are some things that you can share with my audience that are simple, that they can get going with right away?
Yeah, great question. So, first of all, I want to let people know that our philosophy is that the doctor of the future is the patient. And so we've got to take ownership over our health, because literally we are our own doctor, our own nurse, our own pharmacy, and our own hospital. We are being reborn in every single moment of our lives. Like, cells will die in this next minute, and those cells, most of them will replace themselves. So you're literally a hologram of life and death happening simultaneously. So the question then becomes, if we get new cells constantly, Sachin, why doesn't my health improve? Well, our health is really based on the inputs in the environment that we're in. And those inputs come from our mindset, right? So I could think negative thoughts, and I could think of a negative future, or I can get stuck in the past. I can be anxious about a situation based on my thoughts, and that instantly changes my physiology. So our thoughts play a crucial role. So one of the biggest things that happens for people that we find is they first need to have hope, right? The hope is medicine, because it shifts us from that fight or flight into that parasympathetic state. And it's in that parasympathetic state that every tissue, organ, and cell in our body heals simultaneously, right? I'm not interested in healing one organ, right? There's people that are interested in that. And I think that's a very myopic approach to health. I'm only interested in helping people do the things that improve every cell, tissue, organ, and system in their body simultaneously, because that's the holy grail and it's available to us. So when it comes to simplicity, uh, what I want people to know is that Leonardo da Vinci said that the greatest sign of sophistication is simplicity. And I believe there's nothing more sophisticated than the human body. And therefore, there should be nothing more simple to take care of. Imagine you had to understand all the nuances of your computer to just to type on a keyboard, right? Imagine you had to understand how your engine in your car works just to drive to work. It would be cumbersome, it would be annoying, it would be frustrating, and you'd
Yeah.
think it was a piece of junk. Our body is not a piece of junk. In fact, it's the exact opposite. It's the most sophisticated machinery or equipment or creation, or whether you believe in evolution, it's the most sophisticated thing that we're aware of.
Right.
And if we can understand that, then we can also understand that it should be very simple. So I always tell people, if you're moving closer towards a true health solution, the simpler the intervention is. If the intervention is complicated, then it's probably further away from absolute truth of where health creation is. So I tell people, if it's not embarrassingly simple, then you're probably not going to do it, and it's probably not going to move you in the right direction. So, for example, people like investing in red light panels. I have a red light panel, but I can also go outside and get free red light,
Right.
right? We can, what I also like to encourage people to do is figure out ways, and what we help people do is to figure out ways to make health passive. And so, for example, you mentioned grounding. Grounding is a great way for us to exchange electrons with the earth, and it balances our electricity. And it's a free donor of electrons to our mitochondria to actually make energy. So we
Mhm.
literally can put our feet in the earth and make free energy. So if you can't be outside, if it's the winter or if it's just not possible, maybe you live in a condominium or something like that, you can buy a grounding mat for your desk. So right now I'm indoors, whereas before I was outdoors barefoot. Now I'm indoors, I can be grounding by having a grounding mat on my desk. So that's something simple people can do. Another simple thing that people can do is watch the sunrise and sunset.
Mm-hmm.
Super simple. If you can't do that, get outside within the first and last hour of each day. Just do it for 10 to 15 minutes. Even if you're just sitting out there, that's enough. Okay. If you are outside, then the encouragement is to not wear any glasses, especially sunglasses, because that filters the light. And most glasses with lenses will have UV filters, so we encourage people to take those filters off because we want to get the full spectrum of light into the eyes. So that's something that's super simple. Another thing you can do is if you can't ground, you can just put your hand on a tree. A tree is also a free donor of electrons. Yeah. So hug a tree or touch a tree, just lean up against it. If you're embarrassed to look like a tree hugger, just put your hand up against a tree and you're getting free electrons. Another simple thing that people can do is stay hydrated. And to stay better hydrated, they can add electrolytes to their water, or they can add a pinch of Baja sea salt. Baja sea salt is a very clean, healthy sea salt. It's low sodium and high in minerals. So that's something that they can add to their water. Another thing that people can do is they can chew their food. So chewing our food is absolutely free. And, Jared, it's so funny because I get people coming to my office and they've been to 5 or 6 different practitioners, which means they've tried 5 or 6 different diets, which means they've had, 5 or 6 different stool tests.
Right.
And they come to me and I ask them, tell me, how many times do you chew your food? And nobody's ever asked them that. And usually the answer is, oh my God, I inhale my food and I barely chew my food. And a lot of that actually comes from trauma as a child, because our parents would always rush us to finish our food. Mm-hmm. And so we're conditioned to think, well, the faster I eat, the better human being I am, right? The more my mom's going to love me or more my dad's going to love me. We do most things because we want to be loved more. And so people just inhale their foods, but they're actually not going to fully digest that meal now. And so by simply applying what we call the 5 C's, choose the right foods, choose the right time of day, choose the right people to eat that meal with, if you can help it, and then also choose how you feel about that food. The next thing is to chew your food, right? So you want to liquefy your every bite that you take, and probably means 30 to 40 times per bite, depending on what you're eating. And next thing you want to do is chill. You want to be in a parasympathetic, relaxed state, right? Yeah. The fourth thing is you want to cherish, right? Be grateful for that meal that you're having. We live in the first time in human history where people actually complain about eating a healthy meal, right? Go figure. And then the last C is to check, right? So daily you should check your stool, make sure you have good formation, no unusual odors, no unusual colors. Does your stool float or does it sink? Like just paying attention to those things on a daily basis. And then annually, I would suggest that people get a functional stool test just to see if there's anything funky going on down there. And usually you'll find something that needs to be addressed. And if you do, then supplements and protocols to address that, like Cellcore products, can be a wonderful way to knock some of those things out. So those are the 5 C's, and really simple things that people can do, really don't cost them anything, but I would say have had the most profound impact on people's digestions in the people that we've worked with.
Yeah, I'm so glad. I mean, so much of what you just said, I would parrot all day long as loud as I can to as many people who would listen. But I love that you mentioned chewing. I always tell people, there is one place in our body that has teeth. They are there for a very, very specific reason. And it's not just the chewing, the actual, what's the word, masticating, I guess, of the food, but also the enzymes that are being produced inside the salivary glands that are helping to break down that food into its individual components, into the nutrition that we're meant to get from the food. And there's an interesting thing that happens with chewing. And this, tell me if you've experienced this when you talk to people about this. It is so simple, and yet it's so foreign. Like you said, nobody's ever mentioned it to them before. It's so foreign to them that they feel like they don't think they can even do it. Do you hear that? Like, I don't think I can do that. That takes too much time, or I'm always in too big of a hurry, or there's some excuse as to why it can't happen.
Yeah, there's a book that was written called "The Objection Is the Way." And
yes, I love
really
that
the things that people object to are actually where their treasure lies, right? The things that they don't want to do are the things that they're not doing, and that's why they're not better. So, I would love if there was actually, I wouldn't love if there was a magic pill, because I do believe that you have to earn health, right?
Yes.
And you can tell who's working on their health and who's being worked on. So there's a big difference. And,
Yeah.
I think that, when it comes to health and wellness, we really, I don't know why we've been conditioned to think that the solution has to be complicated, because if you ask people what they want, they all want a simple, affordable, sustainable solution.
100%.
And when they're presented with it, they almost like don't even believe it exists, right?
And then
It's
we
almost
get
like,
to like underwhelming, right? Well, that's just too underwhelming. That doesn't make any sense. It's too easy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
here's the thing: that there's another book that talks about basically the compound effect. Darren Hardy wrote this book, and the compound
Another one of my
effect is
favorites.
basically doing many things, many simple things throughout the day, um, instead of just having like one thing that you anchor your health on. Right? Some people anchor their health on: did I eat healthy today, or did I exercise today? But there's literally 100 things that you can do each day that are directionally correct in your health. And so when we work with clients, like,
Love that.
just to talk about simple again, is change your bed sheets. Use linen bed sheets instead of bamboo or cotton or polyester bed sheets, because linen is actually a static free material. They used to use linen in hospitals, and then it just got too expensive. So they use polyester now. But linen, if you study research, and if you go on PubMed and study linen, you'll see that linen actually accelerates wound healing. And if you go
Hmm.
to older world countries, if you go to Europe, they don't wear polyester. All they wear is
No.
linen, because linen is a very breathable, static free material. And it's made from flax. So it's plant based and a renewable resource, if you will. And what's also cool about linen is it carries a frequency that is very healing to the body. So it carries a frequency of 5,000 hertz. The other material that does that is wool. Opposite polarity, so you don't wear them together. But wool and linen are superior materials. Everyone has a linen closet without any linen in it. So a simple thing that we can do is change our bed sheets to linen. Cost you a couple $100. It's a one-time investment, but now 8 hours every night you're sleeping in the right material. So these are like passive things that people can do, but now you're winning for 8 hours, right? Another simple thing that people can do while they're sleeping, as an example, is wearing mouth tape. So putting a
Mm.
small piece of tape over their mouth vertically, so you don't have to seal your mouth, can be a powerful way for somebody to improve the way they breathe while they're sleeping, while they're unconscious. Right. One thing you said earlier is that you don't necessarily practice breath work, but when I think of breath work, I think of working on my breath. And that
Mm.
means that I have an opportunity 24 hours a day to improve the way I breathe, right? It doesn't necessarily mean I have to set aside half an hour each day to do a dedicated breathing practice, right? That's certainly something that we could do, but you're breathing all the time, right? So if we could raise awareness around how we're breathing throughout the day, but also at night, unconsciously by putting some mouth tape on, that's going to improve our health. So a simple tip I can give about breathing, and then we can. I know we wanted to talk about breathing, and we've kind of opened up Pandora's box here with a lot of different
No, I
conversations.
love
But
the direction this is going. It's just great. Thank you.
so with breathing, a really simple thing for us to consider is the positioning of our tongue. The position of our tongue kind of sets the stage for our fascial health. It sets the stage for our nervous system health, and it sets the stage for breathing correctly. So our tongue should be gently placed along the roof of our mouth, and you want to be able to get your tongue across the roof of your mouth and lay flat. The tip of your tongue should be just behind your front teeth. So there's a few ridges behind your front teeth. That's where your tongue is going to be. And then the rest of it's going to be along the roof of your mouth. With your tongue in that position, it should be almost impossible to breathe. Okay, even if you try to open your mouth, it'll be difficult for you to breathe. So this will force you to breathe through your nose. Your jaw will be in a naturally relaxed position. And so that's step number one is placing the tongue at the roof of the mouth. Your tongue, believe it or not, is a postural muscle. So pound for pound, it's actually the strongest muscle in your body. The tongue holds the front of your head up. So when we put our tongue in the roof of our mouth, the muscles in the back of our neck immediately relax as well. Okay, because they're not having to hold the head up, they're getting help from the tongue to be able to do that. Your tongue, through the hyoid bone, which is a bone in our neck, attaches to the top and front of your shoulder. So people with chronic neck pain and upper shoulder pain oftentimes have issues with tongue positioning, where they may even have a tongue tie that's causing excessive tightness in their fascial system. Your tongue is connected to the tip of your toes through your fascial network. So fascia is like basically a spandex suit that wraps around all of our tissues, organs, and systems in our body, and is simultaneously connects every cell nucleus in our body as well. So it's this really interesting system. If you haven't watched the video, Strolling Under the Skin, it's an amazing video that shows you how this system, this dynamic system works, and fascial system works in our body. And so the tongue plays a crucial role in so many different areas of our health. Without our tongue, we can't taste. Without our tongue, we wouldn't be able to speak and articulate. Without our tongue, we wouldn't be able to, move food around in our mouth. Without our tongue, we wouldn't be able to clean our teeth. Without our tongue, we wouldn't be able to push this magic button in the roof of our mouth, which instantly relaxes us. So think of a child who uses a pacifier or a child who sucks on their thumb. Mm-hmm. They're instantly soothed because there's this little button in the roof of our mouth that soothes their nervous system. So think of somebody who's relaxed and meditating. They're not going to be breathing with their mouth open, tongue hanging out of their face. They're going to be breathing with their tongue at the roof of the mouth, slowing down their breath to a count of 6 in, 6 out. That's going to feel really extreme to people, especially because most people breathe in for about 2.5 to 3 seconds.
Right.
So we're asking them to breathe less than they would normally breathe, but it's amazing what happens when we slow down our breath. So just like people overeat, most people overbreathe. The majority of people overbreathe. And what's interesting about the frequency of our breath is the slower we breathe, the longer we live. The slower we breathe, the longer we live. It's kind of paradoxical, but it's absolutely true. They say a mouse and an elephant has the same number of breaths in their lifetime. So the elephant breathes much slower, the mouth breathes much faster, right? One lives for just a few months, the other one lives for many, many decades. So breathing pace cadence is also really important. The slower we breathe, the slower we age, the longer we live, the calmer our nervous system becomes. So as somebody sitting here listening to this, just place your tongue at the roof of your mouth and just start sipping the air in for a count of 6 in through the nose and letting it out for a count of 6 as well. And you'll almost start feeling instantaneously relaxed. What's fascinating when you start doing that is that you go into a state of coherence. And when you're in a state of coherence, your heart and your brain are connected. They're communicating with one another more effectively. And it's in this state that we're better at decision making. It's in this state that we're more receptive to news. We're more responsive instead of being reactive. We unlock our creativity, right? We just become a better version of ourselves. And what's interesting, Jared, is that most people have never met themselves, because most people have never been in that parasympathetic, relaxed state where they can see themselves. There's a saying that, in still water, you can see your reflection. And so imagine you're trying to look at your reflection in a pond and the water is just, rippling. You're not going to be able to see a clear reflection, right? And that's how most people breathe. They breathe in such a way that the water just stays unsettled all the time. But if we can slow down our breathing, we can actually see and discover who we truly are, because it's in our parasympathetic state we discover ourselves. It's in our sympathetic state that we are in survival. We're not necessarily in a stage of discovery, right? So the breath is really the steering wheel that helps us get into that parasympathetic state. In fact, the nervous system, unconscious to us, uses the breath as one of the first physical ways to actually change our physiology. So think of if a lion walked into your office right now, the first thing you would do is gasp. You wouldn't know why, right? Unless you tried to consciously stop yourself from doing that, you would instantly gasp because your heart needs to increase blood pressure very quickly. And the fastest way to do that is to expand the lungs and then start moving the diaphragm up and down as quickly as we can so that we can start pumping that blood so much faster. So our body is constantly using, our nervous system is constantly using the breath to actually change our physical state. And we also know this, for example, if you were to pay attention to ask your wife a question today and pay attention to how her breath changes before she even responds, right? If she says, oh, right, you already know that her nervous system does not want to have this conversation right now, right? But if she breathes in and inhales, right, is excited, right, you're going to see that shift in the way she's breathing.
Yeah.
So you can always tell the state of somebody's nervous system by paying attention to the way they're breathing. If I was sitting here and I was like,
Right.
you would know, okay, something's wrong with this guy, but I don't know what it is. He's definitely in fight or flight. But if I'm
Right.
sitting here and I'm nice and calm and relaxed, right, you barely even can tell I'm breathing. You can barely even tell if I'm alive or not. You know that I'm in that parasympathetic relaxed state.
Yeah.
And it's in that state that we heal, repair, regenerate.
100%. I love all that. And again, I love the way you teach it. It just seems, well, simple. And people need that, I think. So I really love that. I was alluding to this before, and then I'm very good at going off on little tangents here. But one thing that occurred to me, and I'll be curious your thoughts on this about the chewing as we go back to that, chewing our food. One thing that I've noticed, and I tell people this all the time, I don't know that there's ever been a mother on this earth that hasn't at some point told one of their children, chew your food, right? Slow down, chew your food. I think it's like innately in the mother's brain to make sure that that's happening. I think that's there for a reason. But also, if you think about mindfulness, which is like this big concept that people seem to really struggle to grasp, I think in a lot of cases. But if you start counting your bites and you start counting your chews, you put that piece of food into your mouth and you chew it up 30 or 40 times, and you're focusing on what you said, liquefying that food and giving your body the benefit of you doing most of the work upstairs, so that the digestive tract has to do much less. That's really almost puts you into a state of meditation right there. It's a real mindful thing that is happening, because just like when you're trying to meditate and you're counting breath, counting the number of bites and the chews that you're using when you're eating your food takes you away from whatever that stressful thought was that you were having prior to sitting down to eat. It puts a focus on what you're eating. It allows you an opportunity, I think, to feel the gratitude that you mentioned for the food and the nourishment that it's providing. And you can literally enjoy the benefits of meditation while you're eating your meal. Or you can have the news on and learn about all of the chaos in the world, or have a stressful conversation while you're wolfing down your food and getting it down as quickly as you can, so that you can say the next thing that's on your mind. It's two very different things, and one certainly feels healing and the other one feels, well, not so much.
Yeah, so I love this conversation because the visual I give people is that you would never drive through a car wash, right? Like you would never like take your car and just like drive through the car wash because there's nothing's going to happen,
Right.
right? What you have to first recognize, and you would never go into a car wash if I said, "Hey, Jared, I'm going to give you a free car wash," but you know the first step in the car wash doesn't work. So we're not going to put any water on the car. We're just going to like start spinning the brushes and hopefully that doesn't damage the car. So imagine like what most people do is that first step is missing. And on top of that, they're driving through the car wash. And then
Yeah.
they're expecting that car to come out on the other end of the car wash perfectly clean. A
Right.
car wash, just like digestion, requires every step is done, and that every step requires that the previous step is done. So what chewing does is it does a few things, as you mentioned, right? It increases surface area. So the way I explain it to people really simply is if you had a 5 pound block of ice and you have 5 pounds of crushed ice, which one melts faster? Right? And the answer is obvious. It's the crushed ice because there's
Yeah.
more surface area. So which one do you think you're going to digest more efficiently? The one with more surface area or less surface area?
Mm-hmm.
And then it starts clicking for people. The other thing for people to understand is our cell walls, the cell walls of plants are made out of cellulose. And cellulose actually has, we don't make cellulase in our stomachs to actually digest open the cell wall. This is why when you swallow a kernel of corn, it comes out the other end, polished and completely undigested
Mm-hmm.
because we don't have the enzymes to actually digest through the cell wall of plants. So if you swallow a salad, you will poop a salad the next day, or whenever you end up getting it out of
Right.
your
Right.
system, it'll be completely undigested. So we're literally flushing money down the toilet, because food is like money. We're flushing money down the toilet by not chewing our food. And more importantly, we're not extracting the nutrition from our food. So we might be eating a healthy, organic, nutritious diet that's prepared with love and it's locally grown and all those things. But the fate of that nutrient is determined based on whether we chew it or not.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just ends up in the toilet and finds its way back into the ecosystem, but it's certainly not ending up in our body. So we can, if you chew your food 30% better, guess what? You'll get 30% more nutrition out of it. If you chew it 100% better, you'll get 100% more nutrition out of it. And the act of chewing actually activates a reflex in our stomach to start initiating the production of stomach acid.
Right.
Chewing also relaxes us, right? This is why chewing gum can be a relaxing activity for people, because the act of chewing puts us into a parasympathetic state. So there's, again, going back to the sophistication component, something as embarrassingly simple as chewing has a cascade effect of 100 different processes in the body, right? So doing one thing right allows the sophistication of the body to do 100 or 1,000 or even several thousand things right. We just have to have that simple input. So, it's, again, it's embarrassingly simple, but when people understand the magnitude and the amplitude of the effect, they are much more likely to take action.
Well, and the other thing that I think is really fascinating about what you're teaching us today and sharing with the people listening is you say embarrassingly simple, and it is, but it's also embarrassingly inexpensive, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are things that you can do that cost you nothing other than a little bit of focus, where you place your tongue and how you choose to breathe and how you choose to eat your meals and and chew your food. All of these things. I say this a lot on Vitality Radio, particularly during the episodes that we call our emotional vitality episodes, which I believe this will become one. And that is that we have to recognize that we tend to want to think in America, I think it's a subconscious thing, I think more so than a conscious thing, that there is an expert that is there to fix our problems. And that's not just our health, but we think about it with our auto mechanic and our accountant and whoever else we might hire to fix the thing that we don't know how to fix. But what you said, and in your bio, my favorite part is the doctor of the future is the patient. And that is so critical. We have to, in this country, stop signing off our health care to somebody in a white coat, somebody at the health food store, somebody at the yoga studio, whoever it is that you think can make you healthy. They don't have that capacity to do that. You have the capacity to do that. There are mentors and people that can
Mm-hmm.
certainly put you on the right path and educate you on these things. But the things that may be the very most valuable for your health, in many cases, are the things that cost you nothing if you'll just spend the time learning and then doing and practicing that. And this breath work that we're talking about, this embarrassingly simple thing like chewing your food that we're talking about, the power in that is not just the simplicity, but also the fact that there's not anybody listening here today that can't afford to do it.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. And one thing I'll add to the breath is that that's a whole can of worms, and there's so much that we can unpack when it comes to breathing.
Sure.
But I want to make sure I close the loop with the nasal breathing and the tongue positioning
Okay.
and the cadence as well. So the way I describe to breathe, that's what I would consider my baseline breathing pattern. So anytime I'm thinking of my breath, I'm going to come back to that 6 in, 6 out, make sure my tongue's at the roof of my mouth, breathing in and out through my nose, right? When I'm conscious of my breathing, I'm always going to fall back to that default pattern. Like I said, most people unconsciously will overbreathe. And so we don't need to breathe as much as we think we do. Okay, that's one thing I want people to note. The other thing I want people to note is breathing is basically, in my opinion, the zenith of both simplicity and sophistication. Because I can teach you how to manipulate your breath or how to steer your breath in a specific direction to elicit a specific response in your body. breath is so fascinating because I can change the pace at which you breathe. I can change whether you breathe in and out through your mouth or your nose. I can change which nostril you breathe in and out of. I can change how long you hold your exhales and inhales. So I have basically an infinite number of opportunities to, uh, to steer my breath in different directions to actually elicit a response. So if I want to heat up your hands, there's a way to breathe. If I want to increase blood flow to my gut, there's a way to breathe. If I want to fall asleep faster, there's a way to breathe. If I want to run more efficiently, there's a way to breathe. If I want to lift something heavy, there's a way to breathe. If I want to calm my body from a fight or flight state, there's a way to breathe. So there's a way to breathe for every way we want to feel. And so our body is doing this constantly. So when you feel a sigh of relief, Jared, what's the first thing that you do? Unconsciously, you're going to sigh,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's actually a form of breath work, right?
Yeah.
Crying is a form of breath work. So for example, when we were children, the fastest way for our nervous system to regulate itself is by crying, right?
Yep.
So what do most parents do? Not all, but many. And these were my parents, and I know I'm guilty of this when I didn't know better, is we would try to tell our child to stop crying.
Stop crying, yeah.
Well, the only way to stop crying is to actually stop breathing. So think about that from a trauma standpoint, right? So what happens is we store a lot of our trauma in our diaphragm, right? Because when we experience something stressful, we either brace for impact. When we experience something stressful, we gasp really quickly, which is like, like a really quick contraction of your bicep or your, any major muscle group in your body. It's more prone to injury that way.
Right.
Or when we try to stop a muscle and put it into an isometric contraction against a force, we're more likely to damage it and create trigger points. So what happens is these experiences that we have throughout life create a patina of scar tissue and trigger points in our diaphragm, which then change the way we breathe as a default. So we all are born with these beautiful, healthy, fully functioning diaphragms for the most part, right?
Yeah.
And then over time, like a wallet, right? You carry a wallet in your pocket, you drop it, you shift it, you sit on it, all that stuff. After a few years, it doesn't look the same. It's all stretched out and the cards fall out of it. So our diaphragm's kind of the same way. And so a lot of times we store our trauma in our diaphragm, and that changes the way we breathe, right? So somebody who's experienced a lot of trauma is going to have short, shallow breathing because their diaphragm is tight as a drum. Somebody who hasn't, like a baby, right, you're going to see their belly very smoothly move up and down because they've got beautiful diaphragmatic action and activity taking place. So trauma is stored in the diaphragm, grief is stored in the lungs. And so when we start doing active breath work with people where we take them through a breath work experience, this is where we boil that trauma to the surface. And many people start crying, not realizing that crying is a form of breath work. It's a way of releasing and reestablishing and resetting the nervous system. And then they feel amazing afterwards. So breath is something that we do in so many different ways, but we don't realize how our nervous system is using breath to regulate itself, and how we can identify the way somebody breathes to determine if their nervous system is dysregulated. It's subtle, but it's very obvious when you know what you're looking for.
So what do you say to people that start, listening to you talk about this and saying, a count of 6 in, a count of 6 out, put the tongue at the roof of the mouth, and they understand the concept, and then they start to try to do it, and it's difficult to do. How do you coach them to learn how to get into the practice? And because my feeling on it, and I anticipate you have a similar take on this, is that really this is all innate, but we've unlearned it, or we've learned other things that have essentially replaced it. I like what you said, when you have a healthy young baby and they're doing it right unconsciously. They don't realize they're doing it right. They just do it because that's how they were created. But then we learn to not do it right, or we unlearn doing it right. So if it's innate, how do we get back to where it becomes a natural practice that becomes more unconscious? What's the process there?
Yeah, I mean, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but doing a guided breathwork journey can be a very powerful experience for people because it almost allows them to hit the reset button. So it's usually something that lasts between 60 and 90 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fully, like, I actually have a recording. I'm happy to share it with the audience. It's a fully guided, breathwork experience that people go through, and they just follow the breathing cadences. It's set to beautiful music. I take them through a guided meditation. And then at the end, you would, kind of integrate with each other. If you do it with a group of people, many people will just put on the recording on a loudspeaker, do it with a group of friends, and then integrate afterwards. And it's really a beautiful experience because they start to see and feel and release all the stuff that they've been holding on to.
Mm.
And so that's a great jump off point for a lot of people. For other people, it's raising the awareness around their breath. So, becoming, just having that conscious awareness. And there's a beautiful model that my friend BJ Fogg teaches. It's called tiny habits. And so, in order to create a new habit, you need to have three things. You need to have a motivation. So, hopefully, people are motivated to be healthy and breathe better and realize that if I could do one thing that would have an impact on so many different systems in my body, it would be the breath, right?
Mm-hmm.
Light and breath are the two things I think are, instantaneous, produce instantaneous measurable results for people, and within minutes, really. So, we have our breath as a tool, and when people realize that's available to us, they can tap into it. So the motivation is number one. Next is ability. We all have the ability to slow down our breathing, whether it's 6 seconds or 4 seconds. We all have the ability to slow down our breath in order to hit the brakes on our fight or flight system. And the third thing is a prompt. We need a prompt. We need something that reminds us, that, kind of activates us and says, oh, let me focus on my breath for a second here. And so I like to use a phone as an example. So I have my phone here.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people check their emails. That could be a good one. If you're in the car a lot, it could be traffic lights or red lights or stop signs. But think of something that you think of a lot during the day. What's the thing you think of the most? So Jared, I'll ask you, what's the thing you think of the most every day?
Oh, boy, that's a good question. I guess I probably am checking my text messages more than anything else that I do during the day.
Okay. So
Yeah.
now the next thing I want you to think of is your breath.
Okay.
Right. So we just tie those two together. And now every time you check your text messages, I want you to be like, just check in with your breath. Where's my tongue? What's my pace of breath? Am I breathing slow and steady? And if I'm not, then I'm just going to slow down my breathing. And then you just go on with whatever you're doing. It's literally a split-second process.
And I love that, because that's exactly how I learned how to become a well-hydrated person. It was that I actually put prompts on my phone that I wouldn't clear until I took a drink, right? And then I was monitoring it through the day, and I'm a very natural drinker of plenty of water now. I choose, very mindfully what type of water I drink and all that kind of thing as well. But I was not a natural water drinker until I kind of forced my hand a little bit with that prompt. And you're right, I had the ability, I was motivated, but I also found myself just never thinking about it. And so I had to put that little anchor in front of me, and that worked beautifully. But honestly, I haven't thought about that with breath. So thank you. I'll use that.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So this is I have loved this conversation. I knew I was going to as we sat together for a few minutes prior to recording. I mentioned to you that I really wanted this to just be kind of a free flowing thing. I didn't really have anything particularly scripted. I didn't write down a single question for this interview. And the reason I chose to do that with you, and sometimes it's because I'm ill prepared, but but I was intentionally unprepared for this because I really felt like we were going to find the flow that needed to be found with this interview. And I really feel like we've gotten there. I am grateful for how well you've been able to present to us these simple things that I hope feel very underwhelming to people, but in a positive way. Not underwhelming in that, yeah, that'll never work, it's too easy. It's really funny because for those of you listening to this show, I'll speak directly to you now for a moment. If you've heard Jen's story, my wife's story, first off, if you haven't, go back and listen to it. There are multiple different episodes that go through her story. One of the things that she was so overwhelmed by life and the depression and anxiety that she felt in life that simple things seemed way too simple. She had been conditioned, I believe, to believe that the only thing that could help her would be medication, therapy, things like these that were expensive, wrought with potential complications. And frankly, through the years that she had done them, had not really gotten her anywhere. She started to learn some really, really simple things. And initially, they seemed too simple. They seemed too pie in the sky. She thought it was a bunch of BS, for lack of a better term. When she started to embrace those things and she started to do the simple things, her life started to shift. And so, as you're listening to my friend Sachin here and me discuss these things, please be impressed with the fact that they are so simple and so seemingly underwhelming and not overwhelming, because I am telling you, and I can promise you, that if you will start to apply these things to your life, you will find that the simpleness is overwhelmed by the power that you can achieve through taking and utilizing these practices that we've discussed. It's a really, really beautiful thing. And I don't think I could have had anybody come on and explain it better than you have. I certainly appreciate your time and your wisdom today.
Jared, it's an absolute honor and pleasure. I'm grateful for this opportunity. And I want to leave people with this, if I may, is that we've all been praying for a simple solution.
Yeah.
And so simplicity truly is the answer to our prayers. And we've also been praying for something that's easy and passive, right? And so, we just literally scratched the surface of the surface today. But if we can make the information fascinating, if we can make the information so people have a much greater appreciation of all the process that's going on inside of their body and how magnificent they are, right? If a single cell from your body was found on Mars, it would be the greatest discovery of humankind. So we all have that opportunity to rediscover the trillions of cells that live inside of us at any given moment. We just have to make that decision and realize that we steer this ship, right? And
Yeah.
our breath is the steering wheel of this ship. And there's all these other inputs that we can, environments that we can be in, and lighting that we can get, and people that we can hang out with, and shows that we can listen to, right? To kind of keep feeding our soul and our spirit. And, if that, once that clicks for people, then their health becomes unshakable, right? And they become so resilient in a way that they never could through medication, in a way they never could from an outside force, right? It's like they say that when an egg cracks on the outside, the chicken usually dies, but when it cracks on the inside, it's a sign of new life, right? So I hope this opens people up from the inside and helps them realize how amazing they are, and allows them and enables them to tap into their brilliance.
I hope so too. And I think there are going to be many people who resonate with what we've discussed today. So, once again, thank you. In terms of people wanting to get more information about what you're doing, what's the best place for them to go?
Oh man, there's a few places. So I'll share the links with everyone, but if they want more information on breathwork, they can go to breathworkwithsachin.com.
Okay.
And if they'd like to learn more about our programs, they can go to mymetabolicreset.ca. They can learn more there. And they can also follow me on Facebook as well.
Excellent. We'll have all those links in the show description, and we'll grab as much information as we can from Sachin for you. And I know you've got to go now for another appointment. Thank you so much for your time today on Vitality Radio. It's been an absolute honor to have you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And for everybody listening, thank you so much for spending your time with us. It's always an honor that anybody is willing to spend an hour of their day listening to the information that we provide here on Vitality Radio. I respect and honor your time commitment, and thank you so much. I hope that you've learned a lot today. I certainly have. If you have questions, call us 801-292-6662 or reach out online at vitalitynutrition.com. Please check the show description for the links that we've talked about here. And until next time, I'm Jared St. Clair, and this has been Vitality Radio.